Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Colden Company's presentation, Using Automation with Power Automate. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button inside of WebEx, and we'll get to those at the end of our presentation today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I see we're missing quite a few of our Northeast folks that have signed up. I'm sure that has something to do with the 2 feet of snow that landed around there last night. But we'll get started anyway. Okay, first of all, a little bit about Colden Company if you're not familiar with us. We are an information technology service organization, computer guys and gals. Been in business since 2003, so over 17 years now. We have offices in both St. Augustine, Florida, which is where I'm thankfully talking to you from today, as well as an office in Boston Spa, New York, which, as I mentioned, is under a couple feet of snow this morning. Our customer footprint expands out into 17 states as well as outside the U.S. We have many technical certifications, and what's pertinent for today is we are a Microsoft partner, and we have their Cloud Competency Certification, which is what Power Automate would fall under. And then this last bullet here, just want to mention that real quick and pat ourselves on the back for a quick second here. Colden Company was awarded as one of the MSPs of the year. MSP is a managed service provider by Channel Futures. They hold a competition, I guess, every year, and that is a global competition. And there are estimated to be 80 to 100,000 MSPs worldwide. And you submit an application, talk about how you run your business, what types of services you're offering, how you're structuring your business, those types of things, and they evaluate you to make sure, or to see if you're one of the top MSPs. And we're very proud to be selected as one of the top 501 MSPs in 2020, which in itself is an honor. We further learned that we actually were awarded 3rd place for their MSP of the Year award, which is kind of like Best Picture for them. They have a Newcomer of the Year, Lifetime Achievement Award. They only have, I think, there's one other, Innovator of the Year, and then they have MSP of the Year 1, 2, 3, and this is among global companies. And Colden Company was very proud to be selected as one of those 3 winners. Okay, enough about us. Let's get into our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what is Power Automate, who Power Automate is for, and we'll give you the Microsoft answer, and then we'll give you the real answer. We'll talk about some sample uses of Power Automate, and then an overview of it itself. We'll actually break from PowerPoint and show you a little bit of the Power Automate cloud interface. So today's session is going to be more about what you can do with Power Automate rather than the nitty-gritty of creating flows and things like that. Just a caveat, our staff is much more versed in writing the Power Automate flows than I am. I've got a couple that I've put together here, but we have staff members that are much more deep into Power Automate than I am personally here. So I'm going to show you some of the things you can do with it and how to get started with Power Automate. And of course, we'll finish up with some questions. And this is a continuation of our series of Microsoft 365 products. We like to make sure our clients are getting value out of their Office 365 subscriptions. We've had sessions in the past on Power BI. We've had sessions on Teams, sessions on Microsoft Planner, OneDrive for Business, and now Power Automate. Okay, so what is Power Automate? So before I read this, I'm going to open up a poll here. And the poll question is, are you using Power Automate today? So go ahead and answer that while I am reading the slide here. So this is Microsoft's definition. Microsoft says Power Automate is a cloud-based service, and I added cloud-based, and I'll explain that in a minute, that helps you create automated workflows between your favorite apps and services to synchronize files, get notifications, collect data, and more. So as I mentioned, that's Microsoft definition with my version of it, adding cloud-based. The reason for that is there is a desktop version of Power Automate that you can download and use. But we think that the cloud-based version of Power Automate is most applicable to many businesses here. So we're going to be focusing on that today here. If you've ever heard of Flow, that is what Microsoft formerly called Power Automate. Microsoft is big on rebranding things. Just when you get it down, they'll change the name of things. And Flow and Power Automate is no different. But you'll understand why in a few slides, because they're integrating that into what they call their Power series. So every business can benefit from automation. It doesn't really matter what vertical you're in. Automation drives efficiency. And if you're a Colden Company customer on the line here today, you're using automation already and you may not be aware of it. And let me give you a couple of examples. As you use a computer, the more you do, the slower it gets, right? Everybody kind of knows that. And that is in part because of temporary file buildup. Anytime you go to a website, it will download files down to your computer. Anytime you're using applications, there's temporary files that are building up. And that's designed to actually help speed things up. So when you go to a particular website, instead of having to download that little piece of code again, it's already on your machine. It's meant to speed it up. But what invariably happens is over time, you get thousands upon thousands and thousands of those temporary files. Now, when you're going to a site and it needs to find that file, it has to sift through those tens of thousands of files to find the one that it needs. And that takes time and then slows your system down. So perhaps with other providers, what happens is the end user gets tired of their computer being slow and they'll log a support ticket and then they'll have those things cleaned up. But with Colden Company, we're using automation for that. So every couple of days, we're going in there behind the scenes, we're cleaning out those temp folders, keeping your computer running optimally. So that's one example of how automation is helping you today if you're a Colden customer. Another example would be if you are an organization that has protected information, and I'm talking about things like HIPAA protected data or perhaps PII, personally identifiable information. One of the things we do on computers that have access to that information is block USB ports. That way an employee can't come from home with a flash drive, plug it in, take that protected information off the computer and take it off site. One of the things we do with using automation is run a program that blocks those USB ports every day, just in case a Windows update or something were to change that setting. Daily, we're running those scripts using automation to make sure that that data stays protected. So those are just some examples of automation. We're going to get into some more examples using Power Automate in just a minute. So Power Automate is included with most Office 365 subscriptions. And another caveat here is Microsoft just changed their pricing structure in November. They've created what they call performance profiles. And really, my takeaway on it is the free version of Power Automate is going to be sufficient for most small to mid-sized businesses. If you're using flows that are doing thousands and thousands of record movement, perhaps you can exceed their free limit, and they do have different pricing structures for that. I've read their new pricing document several times, and honestly, it's very, very confusing. So I'm going to try to keep it simple here. The free will work for most folks. There is a premium version of Power Automate for $10 a month, and that is if you're trying to tie Power Automate into what they call premium apps. Salesforce is an example of a premium app. Adobe Creative Cloud is a premium app. So if you just Google that, you will see Power Automate premium apps. It'll give you a nice listing of what's premium and what is considered their standard. And finally, Power Automate RPA, or Robotic Process Automation, is $40 a month. What that's used for is, if you think of it like recording a macro, it's very similar in that manner, where you might pull up an invoice and grab a company name or an invoice amount off of an invoice and input it into your system. You can record that process and then play it back on a different invoice, so to speak. That is using their RPA, which is $40 a month for that. So just to close out our poll here, it looks like we have a pretty even split of people not using it. I guess there's more people not using it. But it's a fairly even split between A, B, and C there. Okay. So Automate, as I mentioned, it's a component of their Microsoft 365 Power Series. They have Power BI, which is for analytics. Those are your data crunchers, your Excel people. They have Power Apps for your application developers. And they have Power Automate, which is designed for process automation. So that's why they've rebranded it, is to make it part of that whole Power series. Now, with Automate, there are different types of flows. You can create automated flows, and we're going to show you one of those today. Automated flows are when a certain event happens, do this, that, and the other thing. There are instant flows. An instant flow is something that you click on it when you decide you want to run it, and it runs at that time. And then there are scheduled flows, which, as you can imagine, runs at a particular date and time that you specify. They also have something called business process flows, which are really guides for people how to get work done. We're not going to cover that in much detail today, but that's just important to note that that is one of the other types of flows that are out there. Okay, so the automated flow has a flow to it, and that's why they call them flows. So when we actually log into the web interface, you'll see there's a button for My Flows or Team Flows, and they're designed like a flow chart, and that's why they're named that way. So with an automated flow, you have a trigger, some type of event, and that triggers an action. And then you have conditions beyond that. The result of the action can be A, B, or C based on the result of that action, do this, that, or the other thing. So that's just the general workflow through an automated flow. It's a little bit different with the robotic process automation capabilities. In there we mentioned it's like recording. You're going to record a task, then you test that task on different examples, I guess, and then you have to continually monitor that. So if we go back to our example of the invoice where you're screen scraping things off of an invoice, if your format of that invoice changes, whatever software you're using all of a sudden generates a different form for your invoice, that screen scrape is not going to work the way it did before, or at least it's not going to work properly. You might be grabbing data from the wrong field. So you do have to continually monitor those RPA flows. Okay, so who is Power Automate for? Well, if you listen to Microsoft, they're going to say everybody. It's good for end users, it's good for developers, it's good for IT admins. So as someone that started playing around with Power Automate here, really this year, it's not as easy as it sounds. They tell you don't have to have any coding knowledge, and that is true. But there is a lot of options in Power Automate. There's a lot of ways you can structure flows. There's a lot of information. So for example, if you're using a trigger when an email comes in, there's a million different options and different tags that are associated with an email. And you have to have certain back-end things set up properly in order for your flows to work. So I don't want to make it sound like it's easy that anybody can go in there and just write a flow in 5 minutes. It's not that easy. But it is powerful enough where it's worth a little bit of investment. And we're going to show you what Microsoft has done is taken some commonly used flows and made them available. So they call them templates. And I would recommend that everybody go through and look at those templates that Microsoft has published out there for you and just see if them make any sense for your business. And you can start with a flow that somebody else has already done the heavy lifting on. That's a great way to get started with Power Automate. Okay, so let's talk about some sample uses, and many of these we have done here at Colden Company for some of our customers. On the operations side of things, you can send out daily or weekly email reminders. Hey, don't forget to get your timesheet in, it's Friday, or don't forget to get your sales numbers in. That is all stuff that is easily set up in Power Automate. On the marketing side of things, you can automatically post to Twitter or Facebook when you upload a YouTube video, as an example. This is something you'll see in my flows when we get there. So if I choose to upload this webinar as an example to our YouTube page, it's automatically going to tweet that out and say, hey, check out the new webinar from Colden Company. And that's all done through Power Automate. On the sales side of things, you can perhaps automatically send out a sales report. When somebody uploads a sales numbers into a particular folder, it can sense that. That would be the trigger action, and automatically send that information out to executives or something like that. Those are examples of ways that Power Automate is being used today throughout our customer base. So one other point I want to make is a lot of the integrations, I guess, ties into Office 365. So it's going to be looking for files that you're dumping into Microsoft SharePoint or Microsoft Teams or OneDrive for Business, as an example. You're going to have tie-ins to those applications because they're part of Office 365. If you're looking to have Power Automate find a document in a particular folder on your personal PC, that's not going to be as easy to do. So a lot of this is designed around using a lot of the features that Microsoft is putting into Office 365. Okay, this form may be a little bit difficult to see here, but this is one that we created for a customer of ours, and it's a vacation form, essentially. So an employee would say, this is when I want to start my leave, this is when I want to end, this is how many hours I'm requesting off, what type of leave is this, and this is all something they're picking out of a form in Microsoft Teams. They can add comments in there. I want to go on vacation and go skiing or whatever, and then they'll submit the form. Now, automatically, Power Automate behind the scenes is taking this form and emailing it to that person's manager. So this goes back to what I was talking about before, where you have to have some back-end stuff set up. So it's relying on Microsoft Active Directory to know who that person's manager is. If that is not filled out, Power Automate is not going to know where to send that to. But if your Active Directory is filled out nicely, that form automatically gets shipped off to the manager. So-and-so is requesting vacation time. They can click on a link. It will pull up this form and also give them a nice little button that says approve or reject and a place to put in comments. So they can approve it and say, have fun skiing, and send it back. And once they approve it, Power Automate automatically emails the requester. And this is an example of what that email might look like, telling them, okay, here's an email from the manager and copy to Human Resources. So-and-so has approved your leave request for these dates and these hours. And if they had put in any comments, they would appear there as well. So all done using Power Automate. A final step to this particular project was we saved all of these requests into a Microsoft list for long-term retrieval so that their HR department can have a history of who requested time off, whether it was approved or rejected. All that is stored in a nice Microsoft list. Okay, so that's another example. I'm going to show you another one, but instead of showing a screenshot, I'm actually going to break from PowerPoint here and actually bring up the Power Automate cloud screen and show you an automation used for invoice approval. So let me break here from PowerPoint, bear with me. And I'm going to pull up different screen here. So what I've done is I've gone to office.com and I've logged in with my credentials. And over here with my list of applications, I've chosen Power Automate, and that's bringing me to this screen here. So one thing I would recommend is everybody do that. And click on this watch a quick video. I'm not going to do that today here, but that's going to give you a little bit of an overview on Power Automate and give you a little bit of background information in addition to what we're covering today. The next thing that I'm recommending is to go down to templates here. So I'm going to click on templates here. It takes a minute to come up. And it's going to give you template flows. Save an Office 365 email attachment to OneDrive for Business. It's already got the flow in there. You just have to fill in the specifics. Send myself a reminder. They've got different categories here. So if you want to find a flow specific to approvals, start an approval when a new item is added. There's a whole bunch of them in here. So to get an idea of how Power Automate might be beneficial to your business, go into templates, take a look at what other people have done, and see if that applies to your business. Take advantage of some of the work that other people have done that Microsoft is allowing us to use here. So that's a great way to get started with Power Automate. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my flows here. And you've got different types of flows here. We mentioned there's business process flows, cloud flows, which is what we're going to focus on here. If I want to create a new one, I can either start from a template or I can create a new flow. And as I mentioned, there's the different types. There's the automated flows, which are triggered by an action, instant flows that you would run on demand, and scheduled flows. So the one we're going to focus on today is this one here. This is my invoice approval flow here. So I'm going to click in here. Actually, I want to edit it. Just show you here. So when a new file is created or modified, so it's going to go to my, I've got a Colden webinar team, and I've got a folder in there called pre-approval. So when it notices a file sitting in there, that's the trigger. Now the next thing is the action. Okay, when I see something in there, I want to start an approval process. So I'm going to send myself an email. It's going to have a link to the invoice that's put in there and ask for approval or rejection. That's the action. And then the final step is the condition. Based on the approval, if it's approved, send an email back, or if it's not approved, do whatever we want over there. So those are the steps that we talked about earlier with the trigger, the action, and the conditions. So probably what's going to be a little bit more useful is to actually see how it works, right? Let me go back in here for a second. And I'm going to bring up Microsoft Teams. Okay, and I've got a pre-approval folder here that I talked about in Microsoft Teams. Right now, there are no files in there. So I'm going to take an invoice, and I'm going to drag it in here. Okay, so I just uploaded an invoice. That's invoice 125 here, and that has started the process of my automation. So what we'll see here, it takes a second here, but it's going to kind of notice that, and it's going to trigger that email to me to approve or deny that. So it hasn't picked it up yet. It can take a minute. So I'm going to get an email, and it's going to be asking me approve or deny. And because it takes a minute, I'm going to kind of show you what some of this looks like here. Okay, so here's an example email while I'm waiting for it to come in here. I've clicked on approved for, this is when I did a test run of it last week here. It's gone ahead and said, yes, go ahead, I've approved this invoice. Please take $1 million out of petty cash. That's a comment that I put in there. And sent that back. Now, I'm both the approver and the sender because this is just demo purposes. In your organization, you would have probably an AP person entering the invoice in there and then a manager approving that. Let's go take a look and see if it has happened yet. And it has. So let me go back here and show you. There we go. So it has noticed that. Microsoft has picked it up. And if I click in here, it's telling me, okay, checkbox. We've noticed the file is in there. Now it's in the approval stage. It's waiting for approval. I'm going to pull over this invoice here. And you can see it's sent to me, hey, this invoice needs approval. Came from me. This is a link to the document. So if I want to actually look at the invoice, it's going to open it up. It says we're buying some flux capacitors. If you've been on any of our webinars in the past, we have our secret project Mercury. And we owe $1 million to company ABC. So you can look at that and say, all right, that's something I want to approve. Go back to my invoice here. And please pay. Submit that all out of my email. Okay, and then that's going to generate another email. So you can see, oh, it already picked that up. And now it's processing the last bit of it here. And here's the email. This invoice has been approved, and it has moved it to the approved folder in Teams. And it tells you the invoice number. There's a lot of data you can add in here. So it's completely processed this flow at this point. So if I go back here and if I were to refresh this, that invoice is now gone. It has now been moved into this approved folder here. If I click on files here, oh, there it is. Now that invoice has been approved. All done with Power Automate. Okay, so I wanted to show that as an example. I know we're coming up on 11:30 here. So what I'm going to do now is restart our PowerPoint here. Okay. So we'll summarize here. Power Automate is somewhat easy to use. Not as easy as Microsoft makes it sound, but it is very powerful. There is a lot you can do with Power Automate. Microsoft gives you templates for common uses, and I would recommend starting there. They have a lot of great ideas of ways you can use Power Automate. And Colden Company is here to help businesses streamline those automations. We are actively doing projects with Power Automate with customers right now. We've shown you some of those uses already, and we hope that you can find that valuable. We always end our webinars with this quote: if you're running your business the same way you were 2 or 3 years ago, you're not staying the same, you're falling behind. And that's because their competitors are taking advantage of new technology, doing things more efficiently and better. There's another quote from Forbes that we often use, which says that companies that embrace technology outperform those that do not. Okay, we are at 11:30, but we will try to fit in a couple of questions here, so please feel free to use the Q&A here. I do see a few. Okay, our first question is, do we need to be running Microsoft 365 to use Power Automate? So I guess the answer to that is Power Automate is really part of Office 365. So if you're not using Microsoft 365 today, then you really would, they do have a Power Automate SKU that you can buy just on its own, but you're really buying Microsoft 365 at that point. It's a component of it. The real value, though, is going to be if you are a full Office 365 user. If you're taking advantage of Teams and SharePoint and things like that, you're going to find a lot more value in Power Automate than if you're not. So that's just kind of an honest answer there. Another question here, how do I know if I have Power Automate? Well, what you would do is go to office.com, and when you log in fact, maybe I can bring that up again. Bear with me here. If you go to office.com, log in, there'll be this square here. If you click on that, you may not see Power Automate in your apps, but you would go to All Apps. And if you don't find it there, in your Colden customer, certainly give us a call. We can make sure you get with the proper licensing to make sure that you have Power Automate. Okay, and then there's another question here that's about a specific app. Is it a premium app or not? To be honest with you, I'll have to look. So I'll take that question offline and I'll get back to you with an answer to that. Okay, so those are all the questions that came in. I certainly want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day. Certainly if you're in the Northeast, I'm hoping that your snow blowers are working and that everybody stays safe. If we can help with any automation in your business, just give us a call. Let me flip here, put my contact information up. There's our phone number and my email address. We're always happy to help. As I said, we're doing these projects today for other customers, and we're happy to help your business as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.